I'd like to say welcome to all of you who will be watching this talk today at PEN, Swedish PEN in Stockholm, with our very special guest from Minsk, Hanna Komar. Welcome.
Hello.
We are meeting here in Stockholm today at the Swedish PEN, partly because Swedish PEN has a Belarus project running the first half year of 2021, funded by the Swedish Institute. But the initial idea wasn't for us to meet in Stockholm, it was to meet in Visby. Can you tell us about your stay?
Yes, I came to Visby, to the Baltic Center for Writers and Translators, to write a book for a month. But unfortunately, I got coronavirus and that's why the initial arrangements were cancelled. But I still was able to work on the book, and I finished the first draft even before my own deadline. So that was very productive, and I managed to work on a few more projects. So that was, yeah, perfect.
So you have spent a month in Sweden.
Yes,
now,
yes,
roughly speaking.
a month. Yeah.
And you actually landed with very much the last plane from Minsk that was allowed to land in Sweden.
Exactly, yeah. That was the last flight from Minsk to Stockholm, literally. It felt like the earth behind me was being eaten by these creatures, the Langoliers from Stephen King.
Yeah. But what was brought you here was for you to sit down and write. Yes. And I would like you to tell a few words about this project you have been working on. But before doing so, I would like to say that you have been published in Swedish already. You have been published, a few of your poems that we will be reading have been published in Swedish PEN's internet magazine, PEN Op. And also a prose text has been translated into Swedish and published in the literary journal Provins, and we will return to that as well. But now you have been working on a new project. It's a whole book.
Yes.
Yes.
Book of prose, and it's new for me because initially I'm a poet. And I've never written anything longer than an essay, a few pages. But initially, when I was detained in September 2020, I was writing. I was making notes while under administrative arrest, and I thought that I will just work on those notes and produce some little, really kind of essay, like something. But then I realized that was not enough. And I was inspired actually by Svetlana Alexievich and her book, The Unwomanly Face of War, that I was reading at that time. And I thought that...
At that time, you mean when you were detained?
No. Slightly afterwards. Yeah. Yes. And I realized that I had a unique opportunity to actually talk to people here and now and collect their evidence and like show the whole story, because that was a very important time and a very important episode in the protest, like a breaking point actually.
And this is mid-September.
Mid-September, yes. So yeah, and I interviewed people and combined the interviews with my personal experience to turn it into this 3D picture, kind of.
And the other voices in the books are people who have gone through the same experiences as you.
Yes. Yeah. From the evening of detention, so people who were in the same like space and time with me, or people who were just at the same space, and people who were outside, say, the prison walls, right? But also were doing a lot for us to take care of us who were then in prison. To show the solidarity. It's a big, like, I feel like it needs to be shown. I want to show it, how strong the solidarity and support was both inside the prison walls and outside.
So it's a kind of collective portrait
Yes.
of this time.
Of this time, yeah, of this particular episode of these 9 days in mid-September.
Because when you talk about it as a particular time, as a particular episode, it's not only for you personally, it is also a particular time and episode in the history of the protests.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. And yeah, by breaking point, what I mean is that from that, there were a lot of women detained. I think about 100 women were detained, and that was the biggest, like after the first nights of August, it was the biggest mass detention of women, which we didn't expect. Before that, they didn't touch us that, you know, and we felt like we could do a bit more. And then, yeah, they detained us, and not just detained, but we were sent to administrative arrests and fined, etc. And after that, at every women march, they detained and imprisoned women.
I think we'll get back to this theme, the gender theme as such, and the history of the women's march, etc., in connection with the text that we will read. Should we just, this is mid-September, I think if we should start just a little bit earlier with the first days of the uprising after the presidential election, August 9th, because the first things that we will read are connected very closely with those very first days. Could you tell us a bit about this poetical and photographical project?
Yes. It's a combination of poetry and photography, which are a unity. And with it, we tried to create this reminiscence of the first days and nights of the protest back in August 2020. I chose 6 venues, we can call them, where they were some of the most active, well-known, bright and biggest protest actions took place. And we took photos of me in a white dress, the dress that belonged to the grandmother of a friend of mine who was also detained on the 11th, so he was 11th of August, and disappeared for 3 days in a Kristina prison and was beaten severely and tortured, and he went through all those tortures, like 50 people in a cell for 4 with no water and in their own blood and urine and everything. So he went through that all, and when he went out and after hospital, he just brought this dress to me to show that it was his grandmother's dress, and I thought it was a perfect image because Belarus is compared to a woman, and that the old man doesn't want to let go of. Yes, so.
And this dress is a very simple and completely white.
Yeah, it's very simple, completely white.
It's a bridal dress.
Yes, it's a bridal dress from 1960s probably.
And those white women in white, when you wrote these things and made those photographs, it was already
in full power. Yes. Already the women's protest began and was flourishing, if you can say so. So it was connected with that as well.
Should we read?
Yes, sure. I will also, there are 6 short poems, and before each poem I will give some introduction about the place, to describe the city, to give the context of each piece, poetry piece. So the first piece is called Stella. Stella is the place in Minsk. It's the monument to the victory in the war. And
it's a truly monumental monument.
It's monument. That can be seen in the photos. And on the 9th of August, when the exit polls were released, and with the results of 80% of the vote claimed by Lukashenko. So people took to the streets to express their disagreement with the results. And all the people were peaceful. They didn't attack or anything. But then they were met with brutal force and with stun grenades and everything. So Stella was where it all began on the night, at the night of the 9th of August.
Stelen. I röken från era chockgranater ser vi inte vart vi ska fly. Vart vi än flyr rycker det förflutna närmare våra fanor med sina sköldar.
За димом святло-шумових гранат не бачим, куди нам бегчи, куди не бяжи. Минулое насовывается щитами на наши стяги. And the next venue is the Slavskaya Street. It's very near, just right to Stella, up the hill. People were trying to run away in that direction. And as they were running away, they also built barricades from big rubbish bins and whatever they could else find. And they were hiding in the buildings. And it's notable that very often the entrance to the buildings would be open. People living in those buildings would open the doors so people could hide.
Zaslavskaya. 26 år uppradade likt barrikader mellan mig och dig. Du kan hetsa dina hundar mot mig. Jag är inte rädd. Det är du som är död, som har levt för korparna.
26 гадоў барыкадамі выбудаваліся паміж мною і табой. Цкуй мяне сваімі псамі. Я не баюся. Ты сам пожыў для груганоў. Nyamiga is the next site. I was there too on the 9th of August. And what I saw was several hundreds of people who were actually not aggressive or violent at all. They were excited. There was like music playing. People would give high fives to each other. They were very excited because we were hoping for the change. But then there were all the soldiers and police in ammunition and with batons and water cannons, and they attacked the people there and then arrested them.
Nyamiha. När ni kommer rusande mot oss med batonger och vattenkanoner, vad ska jag göra? Be er att hejda er eller fly. Nog nu, det räcker.
Калі нас атакуе рой чорных дручкоў, калі нашы крылы ломяцца аб сляпую партасць вадамётаў, што мне рабіць? Маліць іх спыніцца альбо ўцякаць? Даволі, хопіць! And the next place is Pushkinskaya metro station and the area around it. On the 10th of August at night, again, several thousand people gathered there to keep expressing their protest. And the police were even more fierce than before, and they, along with stun grenades and they also used rubber bullets. And so they shot Alexander Tarakovsky. They shot him dead and claimed that he had some explosive, something explosive that he was going to throw them. But the videos later showed that he wasn't. That he was absolutely like coming with his arms open. Yes. and he was shot by a policeman, and that caused a huge wave of grief, but also solidarity among the Belarusians. And on the 14th of August, a lot of people gathered, came to that place to commemorate him, and people were bringing flowers. Since that day he was shot, people kept bringing flowers, and the flowers were taken away, and somebody also wrote with white paint on the asphalt, "Не забудем," which meant "we won't forget," and that writing was covered with salt by the city facilities, and then but people removed the salt many times, and so that it was painted over later, and 5 people were imprisoned. They received prison terms, actually, on criminal charges for that writing.
For writing, up to 2 years.
Yes. And and later it was painted over, and but people kept bringing flowers and candles, and then they started detaining people who brought flowers and candles, and recently they brought a rubbish bin and put it and left it there, a huge rubbish bin on that very place of that memorial made by people.
Pushkinskaya. Ni täckte över vårt "vi ska aldrig glömma" med salt. Men detta salt är våra tårars. Det ska bränna era ögon och få era händer att förtvina. Och vi kommer likväl inte att glömma. Vi är miljoner, och var och en av oss kommer med en blomma.
Вы засыпали солью нашай не забудем. Але гэта соль з нашых слёз. Яна апячэ вам вочы. Ад яе ў вас адсохнуць рукі, а мы ўсё адно будзем вяртацца. Нас мільёны, і ўсе мы прыносім кветкі.
Riga shopping center in another part of Minsk. Also on the 10th of August, it was a big, like a lot was going on there. A lot of people, about 5,000 people, came there, and they built barricades, and they used bricks from the road. They dismantled the road, and they used bricks and some fencing and bins and whatever they could find, and they were dispersed several times, and they would come back, and again there were stun grenades, and the sound from that was heard miles and miles from the place.
Riga. Vi bröt upp er terror, sten för sten. Vi ska bygga en ny väg åt oss, och du kör dina krigsfordon över groparna.
Мы разабралі на брусочки твой тэрор. Збудуем сабе новую дарогу. А ты ганяеш сваю машыну вайны па выбоінах.
And the Independence Square, beginning from the 12th of August, when this peaceful wave of the protest was started by the women in black, in white, of course. The other side wasn't black, we were in white. And the Independence Square is where the Central Election Commission building is situated. And so people started gathering there every day, and that was the slogan, every day. Yes, and up till mid-September, every day people gathered there to sing songs, talk, dance, play music, and be together.
Självständighetstorget. Ni stal min röst. Ge mig min röst tillbaka. Jag ska komma tillbaka hit varje dag tills jag kan höra den igen. Ekot av mina fotsteg ska få era betongmurar att rasa och förebråelsen i mina ögon, rutorna att krossas i era tomma fönster.
Вы скрали мой голос. Отдайте мой голос. Я буду приходить щодня, покуль не почую його і знов. Ад рэха моих крокаў раструшчацца ваши бетонные стены. Ад папроку ў моих вачах разобьются шибы ваших вокнаў пустых.
I would like us to return to what we have seen on those photographs, that is you as a poet in the urban landscape. But I would like first of all to say a few words about the language, because we are now hearing Belarusian language. And I wanted to just say a few words about the language situation in the country, because you have two official languages.
Yeah. We do have two official state languages, Russian and Belarusian, but Russian is domineering pretty much and for a long time, while Belarusian has been looked down on, and I'd say it's not just underestimated. People are disencouraged to speak Belarusian. So most Belarusians understand it, can read in it, and they enjoy it. They enjoy it, and they enjoy when someone else speaks it, especially if it's good, you know. But mostly people are disencouraged. And speaking Belarusian in Belarus is in itself kind of a protest action.
This is a very odd picture for a person in Sweden, imagining that Swedish would be a protest language in Sweden. So it's an important moment.
Yes, and it's become more respected and valued by more people since the protest began. And when because thanks to culture, I think, maybe thanks to musicians and writers, you know, who've been on the forefront of the protest, and thanks to neighborhood events that started, where they would invite again some scholars for lectures, musicians and poets, and most of them would be speaking Belarusian, and so people could see and recall what culture they have and how it's like connected with the language. And it's become a way to show solidarity and to show that, yeah, we're the same tribe. Yeah.
But Russian language has also been the language of protests.
Yes.
So the Belarusian is not the exclusive protest language.
No, not at all.
Has this dynamics between the Russian and the Belarusian language changed due to the protests as well?
Yes, not on the official level. I'm afraid on the official level, it's opposite to what's going on, like in the real life with people, because on the official level they forbid books. They try to find publishers who publish books in the Belarusian language guilty of something, and they arrest books or find them extremists. And when Belarusian speaking people in detention or under arrest, they face some more harsh treatment, like they can be placed in solitary confinements for just speaking Belarusian or for asking the administration or officers there in prisons to speak Belarusian with them. And there are known cases when the detained people would be marked with like a particular color when those who spoke Belarusian. So it's like that. But among people, protesting people who support the change, there has been a very warm feeling about the language, and more people started using it in their everyday life as much as they can, or they started reading more in Belarusian, and they started to listen to more Belarusian music like that.
When it comes to many non-Russian languages in the Russian colonial sphere, to which Belarus, in which Belarus is a part, though it's not a part of the Russian Federation, you have a history of discontinuity when it comes to language. That language is not passed from the parents to the kids, but the kids start to speak Russian instead of the native language. Is this the case with the Belarusian as well?
Yeah, there is like this continuity kind of twists all the time, in terms that it can be both ways. That, for example, my family is Russian speaking. My mother comes from a village, and so she did speak Belarusian when she was young, or this village type of Belarusian, yeah. And then as she came to town, because the Soviet Union had that, it was shameful when you come to a city. It was a shame to speak Belarusian because then everybody could see you with rural, yeah. And so my parents are completely Russian speaking, and that was my conscious choice to switch to Belarusian, right? So it can work both ways.
At what age does such a choice come about?
Yeah, I was pretty much of an adult. I was about 23 or 24 years old. So
is this somehow connected with a choice to become a Belarusian poet? Or is it first you as a person who chooses to be a Belarusian speaking person?
It was the language that made me the poet that I'm not ashamed of calling myself to be a poet. Yeah, so I think it's the language that made me a true poet. And yeah, because first I came to the language because I loved it. It always felt like home. So the Belarusian language felt like home, but when you don't have, and that's the problem that many say exists, when you don't have the environment and people who you can talk to, it's very hard to start using it. And so once I had the environment, I started using it. It changed my way of thinking, and it changed the way I wrote and what I wrote about. It felt like it gave me access to something so deep inside, to this subconscious of mine, and not just mine, but like maybe generational, even subconscious. So yeah, that's how I became a poet I am now.
But how did you get the language? If you say that your parents were Russian speaking, where did you get your Belarusian language?
Yeah, we learned it at school.
At school, yeah.
At school, as a subject. They say equal with Russian, but actually not equally. Russian has more, you have more lessons and yeah, I think more hours a week even for the Russian language and literature than for Belarusian, but still we learn it at school, everybody.
So, okay, when the protests started, you became a part of the protests, as did many Belarusians, and especially many Belarusian poets, artists, etc. How did that experience change you? When you look back now, it's almost a year. How did that experience change you as a poet, as a writer?
Before that, I was writing about myself mostly, about my personal experience. So yeah, the focus was on me, and I'd never written any political poems before that, and then it changed the topic, yeah, completely. I couldn't write about anything else but what was connected with our experience in the protest. And I also turned to prose. At some moment it felt like poetry was not enough. It felt like with poetry I had told what I could, and I didn't have more poetic language to talk about it. That there was a bigger story that needed to be told, you know, with language of prose. So it's a huge change, because I could never expect myself to become a prose writer. I always thought of myself as a poet and translator, poetry translator.
This is perhaps a good place to read some of your prose.
Prose.
Yeah. Could you say just a few words about what we are going to read?
Yes, it's kind of an essay consisting of several parts which are connected or interconnected. The parts that I'm gonna read are about, or the parts that are missing, let's say, they are connected with my also ancestors. It can be read, the whole of it can be read in the magazine Province, but yeah, so I kind of track how I came to this point where I'm protesting, and how it's connected with the history of my ancestors that I learned what I learned happened during the Second World War, and how it's connected then with my parents and their attitudes maybe to life, and how I just came to this place where I am.
And the whole text is sparked by your detention.
Yes.
By your arrest.
Yeah,
and,
it's like a thread connecting.
And you were sentenced to
9 days.
9 days.
9 days.
And this was the first bigger crackdown on the women protests.
Protest, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll read in Swedish and then. Jag sitter i häktet av Kristina och petar i den klibbiga havregrynsgröten, mer lim än gröt. Skulpterar fram scenen som utspelat sig vid väggen tidigt i morse då man fört oss hit från polisstationen Pershamajski. Ansiktet mot väggen, fan glor du på, ryter någon åt mig på ryska. Jag vänder mig ideligen om, i synnerhet när jag hör ljud bakom mig. Ljuden i ryggen skulle kunna komma från någon förbipasserande, eller en korp som rotar bland soporna. En katt som kanske är räddare för mig än jag är för dessa ljud. Ett träd som tar farväl av ett löv. Kanske är ljuden bara inbildning. Kanske kommer de ur mitt genetiska minne. Jag vänder mig inte genast mot väggen på väktarens irriterade kommando. Kanske beror det på att min hjärna bearbetar informationen en smula långsamt 4:00 på morgonen. Kanske för att jag inte är van vid kommandon. Min farfars farfar lär ha varit musiker, violinist i en orkester. Musik är det jag reagerar snabbast på. Jag vänder mig långsamt mot väggen och känner en självaktning olik mig. Där och då gjorde jag mitt val. Att göra motstånd som en partisan i detaljerna. Min före detta pojkvän hade använt sig av den taktiken i vardagen. Du gör något utan att be om lov, och om någon ställer dig till svars, då ursäktar du dig bara. Jag avundades honom alltid för att han kunde det. Men det skulle visa sig att man i slutändan har nytta av allt man någonsin har lärt sig, även om det bara varit genom att se på. Att vägra lägga händerna på ryggen, att inte bara stirra stint rakt fram om den inte krävs av dig den hårda vägen. Att betrakta väggarna som om de vore konstverk på ett museum. En annan man lärde mig att även smuts kan vara poesi. Charles Bukowski.
У липкім камяку акрэсцінскай аўсянкі я выкалупваю сцэну ля сцяны раніцай, калі нас привезли ў Ічу з першамайскага руса. К стене повернулась, что смотришь? Я заўжды азіраюся па баках, асабліва калі чую гукі за спінаю. Гукі за спіною могуць належаць мінаку ці міначцы, гругану, які капаецца ў смецці, котцы, якая баіцца мяне, можа, болей, чым я гэтых гукаў, дрэву, якое развітваецца з лістком. Гукі таксама могуць належаць майму уяўленню ці генетычнай памяці. На нервовы голас наглядчыка я адварочваюся да сцяны не адразу. Можа быць таму, што о 4:00 раніцы мозг мой апрацоўвае інфармацыю запаволена. Можа быць таму, што я не звыклая да загадаў. Кажуць, мой прадзядуля па татавай лініі быў музыкам, скрыпачом у аркестры. І найбольш хутка я рэагую на музыку. Павольна адварочваюся назад да сцяны і адчуваю неўласцівую мне самапавагу. Тады я і зрабіла свой выбар – супраціўляцца па-партызанску ў дробязях. Мой апошні каханы карыстаўся такой тактыкай па жыцці – робіш, не пытаючы дазволу, і выбачайся, калі хтосьці захоча спытаць цябе за здзейсненае. Я заўжды зайздросціла, што ён так умее, але аказваецца, што любая веда, нават тая, якую ты атрымала толькі назіраючы, аднойчы можа табе спатрэбіцца. Не трымаць рукі складзенымі за спінаю. Не глядзець строга перад сабою, калі гэтага не патрабуюць жорстка. Разглядаць сцены, як палотны ў музеі. Бруд таксама можа стаць паэзіяй. Гэтаму я навучылася ў іншага мужчыны, Чарльза Буковски.
Min lägenhet är mitt gömställe. Varje gång jag går ut, även om det bara är för att kasta soporna, förbereder jag mig inombords på att inte komma tillbaka. Varje gång jag tar en promenad sätter jag upp målet att komma hem igen, och som motivation lämnar jag alltid något viktigt oavslutat. För att ha styrkan att fatta rätt beslut, att springa min väg när det blir för farligt att stanna, att stå kvar när det är meningslöst att springa sin väg, att fortsätta rakt fram när man egentligen vill smita in i en gränd och ta sig hem till tryggheten via bakgårdarna. Eller tiga när alla runt dig är döva, att tala när det finns hopp om att nå fram. Men hur vet man vad som är rätt? Var går skiljelinjen mellan försiktighet och feghet, mellan mod och obetänksamhet?
Моя кватэра – маё сховішча. Штораз, выходзячы з яе, нават вынесці смецце, я ўнутрана рыхтуюся не вярнуцца. Штораз, ідучы гуляць, я стаўлю за мэту вярнуцца і дзеля матывацыі пакідаю незавершаную важную для мяне справу. Каб штосьці надавала сілаў рабіць правільны выбар. Уцякаць, калі заставацца небяспечна. Стаяць, калі бегчы не варта. Ісці наперад, калі хочацца занырнуць у завулак і дварамі дадому. У камфорт. Маўчаць, калі побач глухія, і гаварыць, калі ёсць надзея дастукацца. Але як даведацца дакладна, што правільна? Дзе палягае гэтая мяжа? Паміж асцярожнасцю і баязлівасцю, паміж смеласцю і разважлівасцю.
Jag arresterades kvällen den 8 september vid muren längs Prospekt Mascherava. Vi var en hel grupp kvinnor som inträngda i ett hörn ursinnigt väjde oss med de vapen vi hade, sång och skrik. De hade gett oss en chans att gå därifrån, men att retirera hade betytt att lämna ut männen vi försökte skydda, att gå med på angriparnas villkor. Vi stod kvar. Vädjande om nåd med framsträckta händer. Vi har rätt till fredliga möten och yttrandefrihet, ekade min nyupptäckta sanning i min skalle. Vi har rätt till fredliga möten och yttrandefrihet, tänkte jag, men hörde mig själv säga på ryska: snälla, låt bli, gå härifrån, låt oss vara, snälla, snälla, snälla. Jag vinnlade mig om att vara en duktig och snäll flicka och försökte väcka deras medlidande. Kvinnorna till vänster om mig trillar omkull och drar med sig mig i fallet. En soldat i olivfärgad uniform som lyssnat på mina böner sträcker fram handen för att hjälpa mig upp på fötter igen. Det finns något underligt och oväntat i hans ögon. Är det förlägenhet eller rent av medkänsla? Vips så står jag upp och är inte längre samma person som för ett ögonblick sedan. Hur länge ska jag hålla på och låtsas vara en duktig och snäll flicka? Jag är inte 7 år längre och soldaten är inte min far. Vi kan mötas i ögonhöjd och i nästa stund vrålar jag ut sanningen på lagens och de mänskliga rättigheternas språk. Ett språk de inte förstår. De har ingen makt över mig. Jag är min egen makt. De hade gett oss lov att gå, men det är bara jag som bestämmer om jag ska gå eller stanna. Ingen annan. Jag är min egen röst och jag är friheten och jag är gammelmarmor och skjutordern och partisanskogarna. Då får du fan ge dig, brudjävel. Väser den rysktalande svartklädde tjuren till snut, tar ett hårt grepp om min armbåge och leder mig bort till arrestbussen. Men det är för sent. Jag har redan segrat.
Мяне затрымалі вечарам 8 верасня каля сцяны на праспекце Машэрава. Раз'юшаныя, загнаныя ў пастку жанчыны, мы абараняліся як умелі, спевамі ды крыкам. Многія маглі сысці, адступіцца адразу, выпусціць мужчын, паенчыць, падняць рукі, пагадзіцца на ўмовы агрэсараў. Мы маем права на свабоду мірных сходаў і свабоду выказвання. Круцілася ў галаве мая новая адкрытая праўда. Мы маем право на свободу мирных сходов и свободу выказывания. Думала я, але говорила іншая. Пожалуйста, не надо, уходите. Пожалуйста, пожалуйста, пожалуйста. Спрабавала быць хорошай, мілай дзяўчынкай, выклікаць шкадаванне. Леваруч падаюць жанчыны і цягнуць мяне за сабой. Ваенны ў аліўкавай форме, якому я енчыла, цягнецца дапамагчы падняцца. Штосьці дзіўнае, нечаканае ў яго вачах. Разгубленасць, спачуванне, імгненне, шчоўк. Я падымаюся ўжо іншае. Колькі можна падавацца мілай і хорошай дзяўчынкай? Мне не 7, а гэта не мой тата. Мы можам размаўляць на роўных. І вось я ўжо крычу ім праўду на незразумелай мове правоў чалавека і закона. Яны больш не маюць улады нада мной. Я сама сабе ўлада. Ідзіце, адпускалі яны. Але я сама вырашала, сыходзіць мне ці заставацца. Я сама сабе голас, і воля, і прабабуля, і расстрэльныя каманды, і партызанскія лясы. Всё, ты мяне заебала. Чорны бык хапае мяне за локаць, вядзе ў аўтазак. Але позна. Я ўжо перамагла.
I would like to pick up this last phrase, that it's too late. I have already won the victory. This is very much what we saw happening, who were looking at the events from the outside in August and September. We were seeing free people who already had gained a victory. But it has been a long time since then. And as people were leaving the streets, we were forced to leave the streets. It became very much harder for us as bystanders to understand what is happening, because there was nothing to look at. And I would like you to try to tell a bit about how the situation has been during the winter and the spring, during this kind of silent time, because all processes are continuing.
Of course, it never stopped. There is no show, no big show anymore, but the protest has continued and it has never stopped, not for a single day since then. And the repressive machine has not stopped for a single day since then. It's just that the forms changed. We have to adapt to the forms of repressions, so to say, yeah, because repressions have becoming more and more massive and more like penetrating. There is no place where you are actually safe. It's not your home even. So in the autumn we had after we had to leave the streets, after we couldn't, in hundreds of thousands of people or dozens of thousands of people couldn't get together in the streets anymore because any attempt was dispersed.
people started getting organized in their neighborhoods. And that worked for a little while, for weeks and maybe for a couple of months. But then even that became impossible. And so, but still, even in the winter, here and there, people would gather in these small marches, maybe 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, yeah. And they tried to show that the protest was going on. And but then there were the police. They found a way to suppress those by arresting activists. They found the activists. They got access to their phones, to their contacts, to other people involved. You know, so that stopped many, and actually forced many to flee from Belarus. Yes. And then they would come, like there was a big, and it's a continuous hunt on the symbols, the white, red, anything of red and white colors, not just the white, red, white flag, which is obvious, yeah, but anything of that color, socks, hat, paper, snowflakes on your window, everything, like any of that is punishable. It's claimed to be fascist, and people are detained for that. But not just in the streets. If you have a flag in your apartment and it's seen from the windows, from the streets, they come for you and send you like 10, 15, 30 days in prison. Again, snowflakes, paper is the same, but what they started even doing, even if there is no flag anymore, they still come to your place and search it. They bring a flag with them and they put it in your window and take a photo and show that as an evidence in court and sentence you to administrative arrest or a fine.
And you get the impression when you look at this from the outside that not only is the scale of repression and detainments escalating, but also the absurdity of the accusations brought forth against people.
For a mere comment on social networks or for a repost, people are sentenced to years in prison. Just recently, a musician, Vladislav Novozhilov, he was sentenced to 3 years in open-air prison for offending a police officer on social networks.
So how, in this very, very harsh situation, when people face very severe repression for the least action, and even without any action, how does the protest work continue? What means do you have of showing one another solidarity and continue the work?
Like what tools, right? Like it's this partisan. We are the nation of partisans. We're known for that, yeah, to be hiding in forests and then do this secret fighting. It can be like street activism, like putting posters in some public places. Taking photos, it's very often now taking photos. You go to some remote place where in the forest, although even in the forest you can get detained with if you're caught with a flag. But yeah, you go like to a forest, or vice versa. You take a photo in some public place, but so that not to get caught, and you spread this photo through Telegram channels of media, independent media, and blogs, to show. It's mostly to show each other that we are still here. You know, we're still here. It's writing letters to political prisoners, not just writing letters, but bringing, organizing care packages for them, helping families, donations to funds, and directly to families. What else? It's now
So you have a kind of spontaneous infrastructure
Yes.
of care when you
Yes.
practically
Yeah.
help.
It's a lot now about care, because there isn't, and still even tiny marches every now and then, and women, you know, this performative kind of things, like women with white, red, white umbrellas going for walks, which makes the government so furious that they hunt for them and they imprison wrong people, so they just grab whoever they think was there, I don't know, absolutely innocent people. So there must be something else that I can't think of straight away, but yeah.
I would like to talk, now we're getting close to the end of this small talk, and I would like to talk about solidarity in an international perspective. For obvious reasons, I mean, we meet here in Sweden because that we have this common work. But I would first like to ask a more specific question, which deals with the relationship between Belarus and the Russian Federation. Because it's obvious that without massive support from the Russian Federation, Lukashenko would barely be in place now. And this is a sad fact. But I would like to ask another question. You, as Russian-speaking and Belarusian-speaking, you form a milieu that isn't confined by the boundaries. I mean, you as poets and writers, you have contacts in Ukraine and you have contacts in Russia and in the Baltic states. What kind of solidarity are you met with from your Russian colleagues? And how do the contacts work?
Yeah, from what I personally see, there is a group of writers, translators, publishers there in Russia who translate and publish our works, and especially a lot of poetry. Really, they've translated a whole collection of various poems. It can be one poem or two poems from a poet, but there is quite a bunch of them, and they publish them in a number of magazines, and they also make interviews with us, and that as well. And they produce like statements as well in support of our writers, for example, right? Yeah.
Would you say when you sit, I mean, you will, after this visit to Sweden, you will go back to Minsk and continue to write, translate, do your things. Do you feel isolated in Minsk, or do you feel any support from the world outside?
I feel support. I don't know if that's that I'm lucky, to feel that support, or more of my colleagues feel it, but I definitely see there is this network of support, and that I can lean on my colleagues from different countries. And Sweden, that's you do a lot for us. Also in some other countries as well. I can see that, and I can see that maybe initially it was not every country, not every collective of colleagues, they could find the forum in which to support us. But I can see now that it's getting more, that it's not just more of it, it's more, maybe people are more firm in their position and more confident, and they probably coming up with the forms in which to support us, the support which is really meaningful, and not just meaningful symbolically, but that it's practical, because it's important.
For example, what kind of?
For like residences, for example, or shared projects, or even publications. These are all practical tools or practical forms of support. And even I think I know that if there are not just residences like the one that I've been to where I come and write, but probably if I needed an asylum, if I had to flee, if I was in danger, I'm sure there would be options as well, and that is essential. You know, it's so important to know that, to keep that in mind, that you are not gonna be lost and left by everyone just on your own with that horror, yeah, with that nightmare.
And this is now we're talking about translating and publishing, so it pertains to cultural people. Do you sense that there is a meaningful solidarity when it comes to other social groups as well, or is the culturally active people, are they especially engaged in this solidarity?
I think culturally, yeah, it's from what I know, maybe because that's just what I know more about, yeah, because I keep a close eye on it. I know that in sports, it's also big, because there is also the Sports Solidarity Foundation, and I know they work closely with different other organizations, and they've reached really good results, yeah, with cancellation of a number of sports events in Belarus, which is really great. And I can see that among writers, yeah, in the writing community as well. There was some solidarity among dancers, but not that much as far as I know. So there are some like spheres where there's more of it, like among writers or in sports, and less of it in others.
Is there anything, any concrete, and this will be my last question for obvious reasons, is there anything concrete thing that you lack from our side? What could we, the neighbors of Belarus, do that we are not doing?
It's always hard for me to answer this kind of question because I feel humble, and I don't have that, I don't think that anybody owes us anything, right? And I know that we appreciate every bit of support. Maybe writing more, making it like writing when there is no show, let's put it this way, and when there is a phase of an ebb, yeah, when it seems quiet, but it's never quiet, and we know that the terror goes on every day, non-stop. And maybe in these phases to cover, you know, still these events, to keep the agenda on, to help the decision makers keep that their priority as well. I think, you know, maybe that could help a bit more.
And while we are waiting for the results of this work, and you are doing, I mean, it's your work, and we are doing what little part we can, while we wait for the results in terms of your freedom, we build a strong network across the borders, and that is an achievement as such.
Exactly, because yeah, one of the musicians who had to immigrate, to Ukraine now, and that's what he told, that Belarusians and our culture and our art, various, you know, forms of art, it becomes more, it leaves, it like, it reaches wider audiences, and exactly what you told, we build connections, and while the revolution is going to be over sooner or later, and hopefully so is the regime, yeah, but the connections will stay, and that's the beautiful thing, that we can all keep, you know, out of it.
I think this is a very good note to stop at. Thank you very much, Hanna.
Thank you.
I am looking forward to continuing this conversation in the free Minsk.
Yes.
Let's hope it will be soon.
So am I, yeah. Hope for that. And thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for looking and listening.